So I'm here to talk today about flora-consciousness and Shiv Shakti yoga. Both go hand in hand because in order to meditate, you have to be able to concentrate. In order to concentrate, you have to have an abundance of neurotransmitters. And in order to have an abundance of neurotransmitters, in this day and age especially, you have to be flora-conscious. So I'm going to talk about what is flora-consciousness? Why would someone want to be flora-conscious? How to be flora-conscious? So what is flora-consciousness? Flora-consciousness is simply being aware of the flora we're growing in the garden of our bodies. Our bodies naturally contain trillions of microbes essential to human health. That's what makes up our microbiome. We actually have 10 times as many microbes in our bodies as we do human cells. They're just smaller, so they make up only about 2 to 3% of our entire body's mass. So since we humans have been applying our intelligence to alter and manipulate nature so drastically and create so many synthetics and chemical compounds that our bodies and the microbes they contain have not evolved with over millennia, our microbiomes and the microbes or flora they contain are being destroyed, and with them our health. So microbiome destruction is at the root of such a massive amount of health issues so many people face today, especially in industrialized countries. It's estimated that 90% of us in industrialized countries have some degree of microbiome destruction. It's a hidden epidemic. When our microbiomes are destroyed, just like when a forest is cut down, opportunistic weeds come in and grow in its place, many of which produce extremely harmful toxins that destroy our neurotransmitters. And that's what makes it difficult for our brain cells to communicate and therefore concentrate for meditation, as well as cause so many other problems, like inability to handle stress, anxiety, memory issues, and so many more other things. Making choices that proliferate the growth of beneficial bacteria and discourage the growth of destructive flora can go a long way in helping us with our health and just live the fullest life that we possibly can and be our fullest self. And of course, also meditate and concentrate. Our microbiome is known as the forgotten organ. It's hardly ever taken into consideration when health issues arise, and it should always be the first thing. It's so common that that's at the root of a lot of issues. 90% of us have some degree of microbiome destruction. We can solve the root of probably most health issues if you just address microbiome health. So why would we want to be flora conscious? Making choices that proliferate the growth of beneficial flora and discourage the growth of destructive flora can go a long way, like I was saying, in maximizing our health and our potential. In order to meditate, we have to be able to concentrate. In order to concentrate, we have to have an abundance of neurotransmitters for our brain cells to be able to communicate. Destructive flora produce toxins that destroy neurotransmitters straight out. So our intestinal flora, as well as the flora that exists throughout all our body, affect our health to the utmost degree. The choices we make have a huge influence and impact on what flora we are growing in the garden of our bodies, the environments we decide to put ourselves in, the food we eat, the air we breathe. So some choices made for us at birth or when we're children affect our microbiomes throughout our life too. But as adults, we can make conscious choices to support the health of our microbiome. One of the main causes of microbiome destruction is iatrogenic causes. Iatrogenic means caused by the diagnosis, manner, or treatment of a physician. And how that affects our microbiome is a lot of drugs, especially synthetic antibiotics, steroids, birth control drugs, and a lot of others just destroy our microbiome. Our bodies didn't evolve with those kinds of chemicals. So another term for microbiome destruction is dysbiosis. Dysbiosis, also called dysbacteriosis, refers to a condition with microbial imbalances on or within the body. Dysbiosis is most prominent in the digestive tract or on the skin, but can also occur on any exposed surface or mucous membrane, such as the vagina, lungs, mouth, nose, sinuses, ears, nails, or eyes. Yeast, also known as Candida, is one of the most common kinds of destructive flora that take up residence in the place of our microbiome when it's destroyed. Candida normally lives in our bodies. It's a natural part of our flora. But when our beneficial bacteria get destroyed, it gets left behind and spreads out of control. A healthy balance normally in our bodies is 1 yeast cell per 1 million beneficial bacteria. So the top photo here is a picture of healthy, normal yeast cells in the body. You can see they're round, benign, just hanging out, doing their thing. The bottom photo is what happens to yeast after synthetic antibiotics. Yeast cells grow into hyphae and they start to infect the body. That's what those long tails are. It's called hyphae, where it starts spreading and creating roots and an infection. So dysbiosis can cause so many health issues. Here's just a few of them: diabetes, allergy, atherosclerosis, aging, early aging, Alzheimer's, multiple sclerosis, hypertension, metabolic syndrome, liver disease, cancer, autoimmune disease, obesity, autism, arthritis, acne, so many things. Dysbiosis can cause so many health issues. So on the left here is a photo of yeast that has grown hyphae and become an infection. When the microbiome is destroyed, other fungi that are not a part of our natural flora can also take root from our environment and cause problems that it wouldn't normally otherwise. Our microbiome is the part of our immune system that fights off fungi especially. Without it, we have little defense. Then, if exposed to mold, the mold can begin living and colonizing in the body. That's why there's such a rise of people with mold illness. There's a little bit of exposure. Normally in the past, if we had a healthy microbiome, people wouldn't be getting so sick just from being around mold. Our bodies could fight it off. So the photo at the top right is mold. And the photo at the bottom right is a picture of Dermatophytes, the only known fungi that's an actual parasite. It exists only to live off of mammals. It's a predator. Normally, it affects only the skin, but when microbiome destruction sets in, with it on the rise, More doctors are seeing patients that get dermatophytes in their toenails, and then it spreads from there to their heart and their brain and becomes life-threatening, all due to microbiome destruction and having little defense to keep things like this at bay. Here are photos of beneficial bacteria. This is the flora that we want growing in our bodies. It helps us. We live in a symbiotic relationship with it. We cannot live without it. It helps us digest and assimilate our food. And it makes up 70% of our immune system. These bacteria are like our own little private army to keep parasites and other invaders out. We need to take good care of them and not expose ourselves or consume anything that's going to destroy them. By destroying them, we destroy our own selves. And this is what it means to be flora-conscious. Beneficial bacteria help us extract energy from our food, produces essential vitamins, regulates our immune system, regulates our glucose levels and metabolism, and protects us against disease. Whenever we don't have their protection and fungi and other harmful microorganisms grow in their place, like I was saying before, these fungi and other pathogens produce toxins that outright destroy our neurotransmitters. This photo here is a rendition of neurotransmitters helping to make connections between neurons. Neurotransmitters make it possible for our brain cells to be able to communicate. And interestingly, most of our neurotransmitters are produced in our guts, not our brain, but our brain uses them. Without an abundance of neurotransmitters, we cannot concentrate or think clearly. Anxiety and depression can set in also because our brain cells are not able to communicate well enough to even process normal stresses. So they build up, stress builds up that could have normally been processed and made peace with. When there's not enough neurotransmitters for your brain cells to communicate enough to do it with, it just can't do it any more than you can, keep existing if you just stop breathing. It's a physical requirement. So sometimes people cannot even access or understand why they feel the way they feel when they're depleted in neurotransmitters, because they can't have the thoughts. This is a list of 8 important neurotransmitters. We have adrenaline, that is the fight or flight neurotransmitter, noradrenaline, which is the concentration neurotransmitter. That one's an important one for meditation. Dopamine is the pleasure neurotransmitter. Serotonin is a mood neurotransmitter. GABA is a calming neurotransmitter. Acetylcholine is a learning neurotransmitter. Glutamate is a memory neurotransmitter. And endorphins are euphoria transmitters. So these are very important substances that our bodies produce. We can't afford to have so many toxins circulating throughout our body, destroying them. Our whole entire systems get thrown off. Here are some of the effects of neurotransmitter depletion. Insomnia, people who just can't go to sleep, you have to have neurotransmitters to be able to go into the sleep state. Headaches, dizziness or feeling lightheaded, mental confusion, spaciness, poor concentration, poor short-term memory, forgetting what you are doing, can't remember names or words, poor word recall, disorientation, brain fog, decreased learning ability, numbness and tingling, tremors, mood swings, anxiety, irritability, difficulty concentrating, and visual perception issues. So how can we be more flora conscious? Basically, nutrients in, toxins out. Don't consume or expose ourselves to substances that destroy our microbiome. Choose foods, drinks, and environments that proliferate the growth of good bacteria and discourage the growth of fungi and other harmful microorganisms. And restore our microbiomes by first purging the body of fungi and toxins, and then replenishing good bacteria. And so mostly here today, I'm going to be talking about the nutrition aspect, choosing foods and drinks that proliferate good bacteria and discourage the growth of bad microbes that harm us. But I'll briefly go through some of the other areas as well. And the part about what we eat and drink is not to be taken lightly, because these things that grow in the place of our microbiome are not like bacteria and viruses. It will not stop growing if you are eating and in some places breathing in anything that feeds it and makes it grow. It doesn't matter what you're taking to flush it out of your body. It's otherworldly. It'll just keep growing anyway, even if you're taking poison that kills it. If you are eating something that feeds it, it'll grow anyway. So that part can't be skipped. So as I said, first of all, we should make sure we aren't putting things into our bodies or around our bodies or onto our bodies that destroy our microbiome. There are many alternatives that I don't even like to call alternatives, because they should be primary. But there's alternatives to the synthetic chemicals that are used so much in this day and age. And even though these natural substances are technically antibacterial in nature, our bodies and the bacteria they contain have evolved with these plants since time immemorial. It's always a good idea to take probiotics if you do even natural antibiotic therapy or antimicrobial therapy, but they don't destroy our microbiomes like synthetics do. Synthetics are like setting off a nuclear bomb inside of you. This is more like burning the forest to manage it so that the whole freaking state doesn't burn down. So it's a bit different. Here on the left is a photo of myrrh powder. Myrrh is a resin from a tree, and it's a powerful antimicrobial agent that's gentle on the body and smells so good also. And the top right is Goldenseal. It is such a powerful antibiotic. I have used it extensively myself. I've had a bacterial infection before with a fever of 104 and rising. And I took 1 dropper full of Goldenseal root tincture that also had echinacea in it. And within an hour, my fever dropped down to 99 because it killed off the infection so fast. And I got rid of that infection that normally is considered something you have to go to the hospital and get antibiotics for because it's dangerous. And Goldenseal works just as well. It has a substance in it called berberine, and that is the antibiotic substance. It's very powerful with bacteria. Barberry and Oregon grapefruit also have berberine in them. And Oregon grapefruit is better for children. It's easier on the liver, or if you're pregnant or nursing. Goldenseal is better for adults. And the bottom right is clove oil. It's also very powerful, very powerful. Here we have colloidal silver. I also have extensive experience with that. I cured my then 5-year-old daughter of Shigella dysentery in literally 24 hours flat with just somewhere between 1/4 and 1/2 cup of 300 parts per million colloidal silver. in one sitting. She woke up one morning so sick, just like everyone else, because we were at a meditation retreat and a water filter failed, and hundreds of people got really sick at this retreat center in Southern Oregon. My daughter woke up one morning really sick too, and her fever spiked to 104 that day. There were other children there being rushed to the hospital, couldn't get their fever to come down and things. And finally got her stomach to settle enough with some peppermint tea to keep colloidal silver in it, because I had been trying to give it to her, but the peppermint tea settled her stomach, and we were able to get her to drink somewhere between a quarter and a half a cup of 300 parts per million colloidal silver through a straw. And she rested well that night. I stayed up all night with her in the infirmary where all these sick people were around. She woke up in the morning asking for food, and she was fine. The doctor examined her. We were outside playing in the sunshine that day. Other people taking synthetic antibiotics were stuck in bed for like 5 days. So in my experience, it was more effective than synthetic antibiotics, because my daughter only had to be sick for 24 hours. And anyone I gave it to got well by the very next day. I had a friend who ended up with a chronic case of it, where it got stuck in his intestines, and he would just end up in crippling pain. And I hadn't seen him to be able to give him some, but I mailed him some after he returned home, and he drank down 2 quarts of it pretty quickly, and he was fine after that. So proof is in the pudding. I already was taking it because I was fighting candida at the time. And so I didn't even get the slightest bit sick with Shigella. The health department contacted us all after the retreat and let us know what caused it. It was a trip. All these hundreds of people fall around sick. Around you fall sick all of a sudden. But we were prepared with colloidal silver. And this is Palo d'Arco in the top right corner, which is a very powerful antifungal, and it tastes really good. You can make tea with it and put some kind of plant-based milk in it, and especially if you have some stevia, and it's really tasty. It has a very unique flavor. And then oregano oils is super powerful. This is oregano essential oil here, but you can also get oregano oil capsules, oil of oregano. It's really powerful antimicrobial. It won't destroy your microbiome like synthetics do. So the most powerful and gentle antimicrobial I have personally ever used, and I've gone through a lot and experimented with a lot, is ozone. I could give an entire talk about that. If you've never looked into it, I highly suggest it. I think everyone should have an ozone generator. Ozone is pure oxygen. It's 3 oxygen atoms that have bound together rather than 2 oxygen atoms that bind together that we breathe. The extra oxygen atom acts as a scavenger, destroying microbes, toxins, and cancer cells. It breaks back down into just oxygen in the body, and it doesn't leave anything else behind. As I mentioned, it's also important to build back our microbiomes after we've purged them of the harmful microbes that have grown in its place. I've tried a lot of probiotics, and the ones I've found that work best are the ones you see on the right here, Dr. Ohhira's. They are cultured for at least 3 years. They have another formula that's cultured for 5 years. So the bacteria they contain are hardy. They've been living and thriving and forming colonies, so they stay living in your body, and they don't just die off as soon as you take them like a lot of ones. The one on the left, Primal Defense, is also a good one. So one main way we can be more flora-conscious is in the food choices we make. You really don't have to restrict yourself that much in order to be flora-conscious. You don't have to be restricted from eating enjoyable food. I can make anything you could want to eat in a form that's flora-conscious. There are so many options. My specialty is in desserts, flora-conscious desserts. I love developing new flora-conscious desserts. It's all about what ingredients you choose to make the foods that you love with. There's always a way. So, the reason why this is important, again, is that it's estimated that 90% of people in industrialized countries have some degree of microbiome destruction. If you haven't addressed your microbiome health, and you either are experiencing health issues or are just not as vital and clear-headed as you would like to be, you may want to consider addressing your microbiome health. In this day and age, no matter how health conscious you are, if you're not flora conscious, it's all for naught. What proliferates the growth of harmful flora in the body if our microbiomes are out of balance? Generally, foods and substances that are sweet, fermented, or fungal. The idea is to abstain from these things until a healthy microbiome is restored, until a healthy microbiome is restored. Even super healthy foods can degrade your health if your microbiome is out of balance. Fungi and other harmful microorganisms that grow in the place of our microbiome, once it's destroyed, will feed off of and grow from the purest, most organic, cleanest foods that have natural sugars in them, just the same way they will a GMO high fructose corn syrup candy bar. It doesn't matter. Fungi are a natural substance themselves. They feed off of sugar. It doesn't matter what kind it is, just like an animal or creature in the forest. The idea is to address microbiome health, though, and correct it so we can have as much sweet fruit or kombucha or whatever we want again without causing the overgrowth of harmful microbes. It's not to restrict yourself from fruit and all these things forever. The idea is to get your microbiome in balance as soon as possible. It's not a lifestyle to adopt in terms of being so restricted that you can't have fruit. But you can, once your microbiome is restored, you can be flora conscious and have fruit and make other choices as well that proliferate the good things and discourage the bad things. And a lot of it is about food combining also, and paying attention to your energy levels. If your energy levels are starting to get low, if you know you've had some exposures that are maybe like that you couldn't avoid, that have killed off some of your bacteria, then you know you want to make sure and have sweet fruit on an empty stomach in the morning first thing, a half hour before eating other food, so that the enzymes don't cause it to ferment with other foods, which would help throw your microbiome out of balance. And so there's just so many basic things you can follow like that, even once your microbiome is in balance, that when you're aware of in the world and when you're going along in your life. So there are varying degrees of imbalance. Not everyone has the same amount of microbiome destruction. Some people are more healthier than others. There's varying degrees. What might not proliferate destructive flora in one person might totally devastate another person. The degree of microbiome destruction must be taken into consideration. This is why I developed a 7-phase flora-conscious dietary plan. There's 7 different restriction phases to choose from, depending on the degree of imbalance. Phase 7, the diamond phase, is the goal to work toward. It's not restricted. It's just a good method to stay flora conscious for life in this world of synthetics and pollution affecting our health and our bodies. Phase 1 is the least strict phase, the amber phase, and phase 6, the sapphire phase, is the most strict. Phases 5 and 6 are actually designed for extremely severe fungal infections and wouldn't be needed by most people with general imbalances. When I conquered systemic candida and mold illness in the past, I never had to restrict further than up to phase 4 in the emerald phase. The way I like to look at it is that, you know, a diamond goes through immense pressure to change from a lump of coal into one of the most valued jewels on the planet. Dietary restrictions require discipline, but that discipline can transform you into the clearest, most vital, brilliant version of yourself that you can possibly be. So here are the different phases of the 7-phase Flora-conscious dietary plan. So phase 1, the amber phase, is a good point for anyone to begin their journey into Flora-consciousness. It's the least strict phase. It takes some time for your body, mind, and palate to adjust to dietary changes anyway. So going straight into the hardest phase, the sapphire phase, for example, can end up being detrimental if you end up cheating on the diet because you're not able to become satiated and satisfied with what you're not used to eating. So the amber phase is a great transitional phase, or it might be all someone needs for who has a mild flora imbalance. This is an example of something that you can have on phase 1. This is a strawberry carob cake that I made. The cake is only made of soy flour and almond butter, coconut oil, and baking soda, and stevia, and carob. And the icing is made of carob and stevia, and coconut oil. Sorry, not coconut oil, almond butter, carob, and stevia. And then we just put strawberries on the top. And this would be completely fine for a phase 1 diet. Phase 2, opal, is the second phase in the progression of the 7-phase Flora-conscious meal plan. It begins to restrict dietary choices just a little, cutting out things like most fruits and whole grain pasta. Whole grain flours and yeast-free bread, muffins, and pancakes are still included in this phase, but treats sweetened with stevia, raw green stevia leaf as well. And this is the time to just get creative. Rather than feeling restricted, it can be fun to embrace all the new and different dishes and treats you'll experience for the first time. So the opal phase is still considered a transitional phase. Someone with a mild flora imbalance or microbiome destruction may not need to go beyond this phase. Someone with a severe flora imbalance may not want to dwell in this phase long, instead wanting to go on to the more restrictive phases. So if you're not getting the progress that you want in healing, that's when you know that you need to restrict further. Here's an example of something in the phase 2 of opal, some enchiladas. Phase 3, the citrine phase, is the third phase in the progression of the 7-phase Flora-conscious meal plan. It begins to restrict dietary choices even more, cutting out more things like whole grain bread, tortillas, tortilla chips, and carob, as well as pistachios and sprouts, which are higher in mold content. More of a focus is on whole grains and legumes, beans, nuts, seeds, and vegetables. Treats sweetened with raw green stevia leaf powder are still included. The citrine phase is somewhat of a transitional phase. Someone with a more mild flora balance may not need to go beyond this phase. Someone with a severe flora imbalance may not want to dwell in this phase for long. You might want to go on into a more restrictive phase for faster healing. Here's an example of something from phase 3 diet is chickpea bread risen with baking soda. And it has coconut oil or olive oil, whatever oil you like in it. Phase 4, Emerald Phase. The Emerald Phase is the 4th phase in the progression of the 7-phase Flora-conscious meal plan. It begins to restrict dietary choices even more, cutting out other things such as carrots, beets, corn, and peas, which are sweeter, as well as stevia. Although it's virtually sugar and carbohydrate free, I have found that it can create problems with more severe imbalances. Desserts are still included, however. You might be surprised to find out how sweet and delicious baked goods or raw treats are with just almond butter, herbs, and spices, as well as other treats and things like granola made from nuts and seeds. The Emerald Phase is restricted enough to suffice for most flora imbalances, fungal, and parasitic infections. Most people will likely not need to go beyond this phase in order to fully heal. However, if you have severe health issues or those who want to just speed things up, will maybe want to look further to the Topaz and possibly Sapphire phases. This is an example from phase 4. Almond butter pecan cookies with almond milk, made from walnuts. These are actually, can be also made raw really easily. It has no grain flours, just nuts and seeds. And you could put, yeah, very delicious. Phase 5, Topaz. This Topaz phase is the 5th phase in the progression of the 7-phase Flora-conscious meal plan. It really starts to restrict dietary choices more, cutting out even things with a minute amount of mold content, such as nuts, seeds, beans, dried herbs, and roots, as well as things with a very minute amount of sugar content like lemons and limes. One exception is tofu. Although it is made from soybeans, no mold content appears to translate over into the making of tofu. It becomes a primary protein source in this phase. Desserts are no longer as present within the Topaz phase, with the exception of occasional tasty salad made from sweeter things like cherry tomatoes, bell peppers, and such, along with avocados. The Topaz phase is almost as restrictive as it possibly gets. It's designed to follow for as short of a time as possible, but will help speed up healing and correcting flora imbalances. This is probably the strictest phase that anyone would need, but those with more severe health issues, or those who don't seem to be making as much progress as needed, or those who just want to speed up their healing process may want to look beyond the Topaz phase to the Sapphire phase. So this is something from the Topaz phase. It's brown rice and tofu and veggies, stir-fried rice with tofu. So this is phase 6, the Sapphire phase. It's the most strict. The dietary restrictions in the Sapphire phase take things a step further than the Topaz phase, eliminating all whole grains and oils from the diet, with the exception of avocados and what fat is contained in tofu. This includes organic olive oil, organic coconut oil, all oils. This is because I have found that if oils are transported or stored in weather that is above 75 degrees, it seems to begin to develop a minute amount of rancidity and therefore mold content, and can feed very severe problems and make them worse. In the winter time, in colder areas, not as much of an issue. In the summertime is when I've noticed the most problems, but yeah. So all whole grains are also eliminated for this phase. This is to remove as much carbohydrates as possible from the diet, as fungi and parasites feed off of carbohydrates. Although when they're whole grains, not so much, because the way our bodies process them, it's not like refined grains, because the fiber is still intact, so it doesn't become glucose or sugar. It doesn't turn into sugars in the same way as when you're eating refined grains in your body. But we remove them in this phase just to help speed things along anyway from what carbohydrates there are in it. Tofu also contains carbohydrates, but because they're filled with protein, they contain less carbohydrates than whole grains. Plus, cutting out tofu as well would just leave vegetables and avocados, and most people wouldn't be able to sustain themselves for long on that alone. Nuts and seeds would be a preferable option, but the minute amount of mold content they contain presents far more of a problem than the carbohydrates found in tofu. Although tofu is made from beans, it appears, as I said before, that turning soybeans into tofu, this mold content is eliminated. This does not seem to be the case in the making of soy milk, however, but even when it's made from just soybeans and water and nothing else. But thankfully, no mold content seems to translate over from soybeans into tofu because, as I said before, all dried beans have naturally a minute amount of mold content, and it's enough to create problems and severe issues. But luckily, it doesn't seem to translate over into the making of tofu. So tofu seems to be pretty free of it. So the sapphire phase is not meant to be a permanent lifestyle choice. It's meant to be implemented when imbalances, while only severe imbalances who really need it, the help with this, are corrected. Once healing is acquired and maintained, we should transition back into a normal diet, preferably toward the diamond phase. But before we go on to the next phase, you want to go back down 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then into the diamond phase. And make sure you can reintroduce those foods back into your diet without any problems, without noticing a decline in your health. This is an example of a dish from the phase 6 sapphire phase. Tofu salad with avocado dressing. And this is phase 7, the diamond phase. And as I said, you want to work your way back down to 1 before you go up to 7. It's a spiral rather than a straight line. So the diamond phase is the final phase in the progression of the 7-phase Flora-conscious meal plan and the least restrictive. Actually not meant to be restrictive at all, just smart. Once imbalances in the body are corrected, healing is acquired and maintained, and we're ready to transition into a normal diet again. It's time to move into the diamond phase. The diamond phase consists of a wide variety of foods without restriction, yet conscious of flora balance to keep us pristine, clear, and shining like a diamond. And in the diamond phase, you can eat so many things. Goji berries, fruit smoothies, don't forget your green juices, watermelon, granola, and milk, plant-based milk, of course, smoothies, carob treats, or even cacao treats, blueberry smoothies, almond butter and crackers, spirulina bars, that's a really good one. And see, it's dried and it has dried fruit in it and everything. And normally, if your microbiome is out of balance, you wouldn't want to be eating that. But once your microbiome is restored, it makes you feel good and healthy. Here's some more examples of some yummy raw food on the left that is part of the diamond phase, and a pizza on the right. Mexican food on the left, raw burger on the right, with green soup. More foods we can have in the diamond phase. It opens everything up. It's just about being flora-conscious. So yes, our microbiome affects our brains and our ability to think and concentrate and meditate.